afternoon, members of the media, wider viewing and listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you all very much for joining me on a Friday afternoon. Thank you very much for joining me on a Friday afternoon for this media conference. There have been a number of developments in the world of COVID and how the pandemic is being dealt with. I know that the Ministry of Health had their regular press conference this morning. I just came off the phone with both the Minister of Health as well as the Chief Medical Officer. We at National Security, as you're aware, play a role and a part in the management of how Trinidad and Tobago deals with this global pandemic and our response to the global pandemic. So there is one specific, fairly substantial announcement I've asked you all to come here today and to speak to you all about that we plan to introduce. You would have heard the Prime Minister mention a few weeks ago that he intends to propose some changes to the exemption process. But before we get there, I'd like to just use the opportunity to just remind everyone that we remain in a global pandemic, and that global pandemic means that this virus is raging throughout the world. Virtually every country has been touched by this potentially deadly disease. And, you know, it is quite disturbing. One of the things that I've been reflecting on is that, unfortunately, some people still seem to believe it's business as usual. And I'm just going to touch briefly on some of the decisions that the government took over time to get us to the place that we are now. But I want to use the opportunity through you to just remind our population, our citizens, and even our non-citizens that with this global pandemic raging, it travels, it spreads, all right? And travel is one of the main ways and routes that this virus and the new variants of the virus are able to spread from country to country to country. So it's not business as usual. And the same type of warning we gave in March last year, where we said it should really only be essential travel, and we in the government continue to cancel travel, etc. People really should bear that in mind. And if I could just share with you very briefly, because I think it is the personal things when you're touched by this virus that really register and bring it home. Even though I've been given the responsibility of playing a part in managing the country's response to the pandemic and to this COVID-19 over the space of a year now, is when it really comes home very close to you. And within the last week, I've lost a very, 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 very close friend of mine to COVID-19. And as being one of the people that has been pleading with the population and pleading with people throughout, asking, just the simple things, the social distancing, wash your hands, wear your mask, and these types of things, and try and restrict your movement, and seeing us go through the various curves. I just want to use the opportunity to remind everyone it comes down to each and every one of us and our personal decisions. Trinidad and Tobago's response to how we manage COVID-19 and its spread has constantly evolved. That's one of the things, one of the points I want to make. There's no consistent policy that stays in place and doesn't evolve. If you don't evolve as more science, more data comes, you're going to be stuck and you may find yourself behind the ball, so to speak. And we have consistently, as a government, utilized science and the advice of our medical healthcare professionals who have done human service in making the decisions. Very early o'clock in March of last year, the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago took a decision to appoint a 3-man sub-cabinet team headed and chaired by the Honourable Prime Minister. It includes the Minister of Health, Minister Dial Singh, and myself as the Minister of National Security. And Cabinet took the decision to appoint this 3-man sub-cabinet committee team to be able to respond very quickly and to take decisions very quickly, but always based on the science, always based on the medical advice available to us, both locally and globally, and always in the best interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that I feel certain about and is without any doubt in my mind. But this 3-man cabinet team takes decisions, and these decisions are then taken. Sometimes we take the advice of cabinet makes the advice, sometimes cabinet ratifies the decisions that we've made. We consult with the Attorney General when there are legal issues and implications to be had. And as and when necessary, we can bring in other people to assist us in the decision making. But all of the decisions with respect to how we've managed COVID over the period of now 1 year, because it started in January of 2020, when we were one of the first countries in the world to start to take the decisions, in particular with respect to our borders. We were the first country in the Western Hemisphere to take a decision to close our borders to China. And that is a fact. That decision was taken last year. And then it was on the 22nd of March, the night of the 22nd of March into the 23rd of March, Trinidad and Tobago closed its borders to both nationals and non-nationals. And our borders have remained closed, and that was done legally, with right legal advice. There have been a number of challenges to that in the courts, and so far the courts have upheld it. Because at the end of the day, it is recognized that in a global pandemic, you have to take decisions that are going to affect persons' lives. And we take no joy or no satisfaction in that. But at the end of the day, we know what we're doing is to protect the population here in Trinidad and Tobago. And that's something I've repeated time and time again. Just a few short minutes ago, and I'm not even aware, well, I wouldn't know what you know, but a few short minutes ago, I was alerted on my way to this press conference to an international report that has just come out, and I printed it out, and it's marked 1 hour ago. Prime Minister Boris Johnson, just over an hour ago, made an announcement. And I just want to draw that to our attention. This is the BBC story on it by James Gallagher. New UK variant, quote, may be more deadly, unquote. Early evidence suggests that the variant of coronavirus that emerged in the United Kingdom may be more deadly, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said. The new infectious variant has already spread widely across the United Kingdom. Mr. Johnson told a Downing Street briefing, quote, in addition to spreading more quickly, it also now appears that there is some evidence that the new variant, the variant that was first identified in London and the southeast, may be associated with a higher degree of mortality. It's largely the impact of this new variant that means the NHS is under such intense pressure. From day one, we have explained that the repatriation process and the number of persons that can be repatriated is also guided by the science, and is guided by our decision that everyone coming into Trinidad and Tobago is required to go into quarantine. Of course, the science of quarantine is what you do is you ring-fence persons who are being repatriated. And if somebody is positive in that group, it allows you to get to that positive, extract them, and put them into a parallel healthcare system if necessary. And that is one of the continuation of that is what actually helped us when we identified the first case of this UK variant in Trinidad and Tobago that was announced yesterday. Another point I made a short while ago is our process of how we deal and respond to COVID has continued to evolve. We've taken decisions. You all would recall in April of last year, we took decisions to go into stay-at-home and serious stay-at-home orders that had impact on us, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and our movement. Fortunately, we were able to come out of that. Just around August, we got a big spike, or a larger spike, and we went back into some level of stay-at-home. We've managed our way out of that. Throughout, since the 22nd of March, our borders have remained closed to nationals and non-nationals. And as you are aware, we here at National Security have done our best, despite what others may think, to manage the repatriation of persons and the exit of persons. And some statistics that you all would have heard me give over time, and I'm going to start by giving you all the latest statistics. So I always use the 29th of July as a significant point, because up to the 29th of July, that is the point where we use that persons who were, and I'll get into the various categories of our nationals, persons who hold Trinidad and Tobago citizenship, who may have been stuck out of Trinidad and Tobago. We use the July 29th as a date where people who were desperately stuck would have put in their applications, because the first category of people when we shut the borders were those who would have been caught completely unaware and would have been out on short trips, short vacations, and I remember that vividly. Persons who had gone out for a week, 2 weeks, we had a number of stories. I mean, there are very few stories I can hear at this stage that we haven't heard before. And they were very heart-wrenching and difficult stories as an individual to swallow and to fathom as we continue to try to manage this pandemic. So you may have had persons who went out for 1 week vacation or 2 week vacation, got stuck outside. And I always thought every single night, if you went out, you have limited money for that 2 weeks. You have limited clothes for that 2 weeks. You had a number of persons, for example, in that category who may have been pregnant at the time. I remember these stories. They went out to buy baby clothes. They got stuck outside there. So we use the 29th of July as being the date where the vast majority of people in that category, those who were caught unprepared, so to speak, at the closure of the borders, were outside. At the 29th of July, we had 5,539 applications for persons to come back home. So roughly 5,500 persons applying to come back home. Let's jump to the 20th of November. At 20th of November, that list of persons who applied to enter Trinidad and Tobago had grown to 13,922. But at that time, we had granted exemptions to enter Trinidad and Tobago of 7,895 persons. So by November, and it had even started by October, if I go to October 31st rather, by October 31st, there were 12,717 applications to enter Trinidad and Tobago, and we had granted exemptions to 6,972. So the 31st of October, it was around that time that we looked at it and said, okay, we can start to allow more and more persons in different categories to come in. The persons in different categories are as follows. There's the first category, those who were stuck outside, unaware, had gone for short vacations. There was then the category of persons who frequently, and you all know them, every single one of us has family like this, who may have gone away for a long vacation. Some of them may have green cards, whatever it might be. They go out every year on an annual basis for a number of months. When they're finished, they return. It might be for the winter months, they come back to Trinidad, and they do it like that. Then there was another category we began to pick up. Those citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who may go outside, stay longer than their visas allow them to, and working maybe illegally in other countries. But of course, when COVID, being a global pandemic, started to affect some of these other jurisdictions, they began to lose their jobs. They wanted to come back home. There's another category of persons, those who had decided to make their lives away. And this is a number that we very often talk about. Both the Prime Minister and I, you would have heard say, there are over 330,000 Trinidad and Tobago passport holders. And I remember at the start of this, a lot of people reaching out, and they did not have current Trinidad and Tobago passports. Their passports had expired for years. They said, well, they have their US passport, but they all tried now to resurrect the Trinidad and Tobago passports. So that's another category of our nationals, those who may have chosen to make their lives away, to be domiciled away, and now due to difficulties, due to their fear of not having medical treatment, whatever it might be, they now wanted to return home. And all of these numbers, of course, are converging on us here in Trinidad and Tobago and adding to the rising number of applications. Bearing those in mind, and then now as we got to the time in October, by then we had increased the number of flights. And what is happening is flights leaving Trinidad and Tobago are also full. So you had people leaving. You would remember in September, in August, a lot of students saying they wanted to go back to school, they needed to get back to school, etc. Some of those students, when they got there and the pandemic started to rage, the virus started to rage in the various jurisdictions, they then wanted to come home to do classes online, etc. All of these things continue to add to the numbers. But then the category of persons who choose to leave Trinidad and Tobago, go up to, for whatever reason it might be, there's some who are for medical reasons, which is understandable. There may be some others who say, look, I just need to get out of here, go and take some time, and now they're knocking on the doors to come back. All of these continue to add to the numbers. So at the 20th of November, as I said, there were 13,922 applications. As at that date, 7,895 were granted to come back. The last time I think we met was on the 23rd of December or thereabouts, and I gave the following number, 17,211 applications. What that showed is a spike and an increase in numbers, because by November, early November, we had decided, and the Prime Minister had announced, we had announced at one of his conferences, that we may be able to take some people, not everyone, we made that very clear, who wanted to come home for Christmas, because we believed we had cleared the vast majority of the 5,539. When you look at the number by the 31st of October, we had exceeded it by 1,400. By 20th of November, we were now 7,800 exemptions granted. So we felt, okay, we could start letting others come back for Christmas, etc. So by the 23rd of December, you had 17,211 applications and 9,557 exemptions granted. As at yesterday, the 21st of January, the number of applications has risen to 19,941 applications. So you would see from the 29th of July to yesterday, there is now over 14,000 applications being made. So as yesterday, 19,941 applications were made, 11,682 exemptions granted. So we've doubled the number of exemptions as at that 29th of July applications being made. So in July 29th, 5,500. As at yesterday, 11,600 exemptions granted to enter Trinidad and Tobago. As I say, there are these varying categories of persons. We have always had policies and principal policies in place as to how it is determined exemptions are granted. So initially, the emphasis was on getting home those persons who were stuck in those short period. They thought they were going out for a short period trip, and to getting them back as quickly as possible once it married with the quarantine space available. We've always made that point very, very clear. I think one of the things I was going to focus on here is what Prime Minister Boris Johnson said. It's largely the impact of this new variant that means the NHS, which is their national health system, is under such intense pressure. We never wanted Trinidad and Tobago's healthcare system to be at a state of collapse and under intense pressure, as we have seen taking place in many countries, including the United States, around the world. We have taken and we've made decisions with respect to our borders. One of the recent decisions over the last month and a half, 2 months, was the introduction of a 72-hour. They need to have a negative PCR test, and a specific one, a PCR test, 72 hours before arrival. All of these things are done so we can increase the number of repatriations, increase the number of persons on a plane to come back to Trinidad and Tobago, but reduce the risk of the virus coming back in whilst we manage what exists here in Trinidad and Tobago. You see now in other countries around the world, they are now moving towards that. Canada has introduced it. United Kingdom has introduced it. United Kingdom recently introduced their border controls and closed it. The same thing with Canada. The United States, I think as at the 26th of this month, are now introducing these. And there are other countries who have done similar to us. There is no perfect solution. There's no perfect formula to stop this virus. So we've been managing it and evolving it. What I've asked you all to come here for this afternoon is at Monday, we plan to introduce a new system for persons applying to return and to exit Trinidad and Tobago. So there's going to be a new online, IT-driven application form system that I think we're going to do a short video of in a short while, that we're introducing from Monday. And everyone who wishes to return to Trinidad and Tobago, to enter Trinidad and Tobago, is going to be asked to go and fill out this form from Monday, similar to what we fill out when we're applying for visas, for example. You want a US visa, a Canadian visa, it is similar to that. What this form has, as we'll see in a short while, a number of essential questions. One of the questions is, when did you last leave Trinidad and Tobago? Because you see, in introducing more equity into the system, persons who were outside for longer, and then you have these same people who may be leaving in October, November. So I'm seeing a lot of applications like that. Persons who have left in October, who have left in November. And then now what they're seeing, and they're putting it in their reason to return. They're seeing the effects of a deadly virus. So certain persons in the UK reached out and said, listen, I can't handle being in a United Kingdom hospital and the doctors in the hospital, an accident and emergency, literally taking a decision who to take into accident and emergency, looking at patient X and saying, well, they're not going to make it, so don't worry, for the one bed we have in here, let's try with these two. And that is what is going on around the world in these other countries. And our heart goes out to them and we feel sympathy. But that is what we are trying to avoid here in Trinidad and Tobago. And what, by and large, knock on wood, we have avoided. And one of the essential pillars of that is our border control. And on Monday, we're going to launch this new online system. The online system has unique features. You can only fill out the form once. If you're filling out the form for yourself and your family members, there's the information for yourself and your family members in the same form. The form will produce a unique identification number. The form goes into a database that then sends you email over time to say where your application has reached, etc. The form asks questions that allows us to go through via the IT system and prioritize persons. All of this is being designed to make it a easier to manage process. Because you see right now, and I've smiled over time, when I see people saying, I've applied 22 times, I've applied 23 times, and they're sending an email, what the population may not know, and I understand how difficult it is for the people out there, is very often those 22, 23 times, you'll see the email come in from Stuart Young at 101, Stuart Young at 102, Stuart Young at 103, Stuart Young at 104, 105, that's 5. I come back at 2:30, I send another 5. I come back at 8 o'clock, I send a number 5 of the identical email. And what that was doing is backlogging the system. Because the persons who had to go through it would see Stuart Young sending 22 email in one day, the same email time and time again. And what it meant is other persons were being lost in between that. The form system is going to eradicate all of that. Another important feature of the form system is we're making it a statutory declaration. Very similar to when you were coming into Trinidad and you had to fill out your immigration and customs form, that you declare that all of the information in the form is truthful. Otherwise, it could be a potential criminal offense. That is how another feature of these forms. Another feature of these forms is we're working with immigration to verify the information that is being put in. So if you say you left on X date, we're going to verify that with immigration. All of these features immediately should show to you. What it does is it filters as we continue with our border management and our border control. So maybe now is an appropriate time. I can ask that you all show the video. I've asked them to keep it to less than 5 minutes.
Welcome to the Ministry of National Security's Travel Exemption online application. Click on Exemption application to get started.
All right. Okay, you all ready? Okay, let's start it over, please. Thank you.
Welcome to the Ministry of National Security's Travel Exemption online application. Click on Exemption application to get started. When you are ready to start your application, click Next. You may apply for an exemption for yourself or someone else or on behalf of members of your family if you are traveling together. First, fill in your name, contact number, and your email address. If you are applying for a travel exemption for yourself, click Yes. Next to Representative is Applicant. If you are applying on behalf of someone else, then click No. For a single application, click Individual, and for a family application, choose Family. Please indicate whether you are applying for an exemption to enter or leave Trinidad and Tobago by choosing either Request to Enter TNT or Request to Depart TNT. If you are applying for an exemption to enter TNT, select your required method of entry into Trinidad and Tobago by choosing one of the available options. Please indicate the country where you are currently located and then enter the location within that country. Your intended final port of entry before entering Trinidad and Tobago is also required. If you are willing to pay for state supervised quarantine, select Yes next to Willing to pay for quarantine. If you require state quarantine, then click No. Review your information to ensure that all required fields are filled in. Required fields are marked with a red asterisk. When you are ready, click Next. The next page, you will need to provide additional information for each person who will be traveling to or from Trinidad and Tobago. If applicable, click on the Add Family Member button to provide information for other members of the family. Review your information and click Next when you are ready. On this page, you can upload copies of any required or supporting documents. Multiple files can be selected for some of the fields. Click Next once you have uploaded all the required documents. On this page, you can review all the information you have entered for your exemption application. You can go back to any of the pages to make changes if necessary by clicking on the red circles at the top of the page. Read and digitally sign the Declaration of Truth on the final page by clicking on the checkbox located on the signature. Click Submit to complete the application. You will receive an email confirming receipt of your application. To check on the status of your application, return to the Travel Exemptions application page and click on Query Application. Enter your email address and your reference number and click Submit. An email will be sent to the address provided with information on the current status of your application. Click on the link in the email to return to your application and provide the required information. Review your travel arrangements and confirm your quarantine preferences by filling out the required fields. If you choose to utilize paid state-supervised quarantine facilities, then a copy of the booking for your selected hotel must be provided. Click Submit when you are finished entering the information.
So thank you all very much. That's just a short intro into the system that is going to be launched from Monday. Everyone who has applied to enter Trinidad and Tobago as individual categories or family categories will be required to fill out these forms, and likewise persons departing. The category outside of that are those who are the corporate persons coming to Trinidad and Tobago, leaving Trinidad and Tobago. By and large, this has been in the oil and gas industry. Trinidad and Tobago has successfully managed that for the past year, and no production in Trinidad and Tobago in the oil and gas has been held back as a result of our borders being closed. We will continue to manage that. We have a system that is working, and that system, all of this will be up on the Ministry of National Security website. For the corporate persons and those oil and gas companies, there are also manufacturers that need to bring in persons to service their plants, upgrade their plants, and these types of instances. There are going to be 2 new email addresses introduced. Corp, C-O-R-P, travel exemption, one word. So all we're doing is introducing in front of the pre-existing travel exemption email the word corp, C-O-R-P, travel exemption, one word, at mns.gov.tt, and to leave corp depart exemption at mns.gov.tt. All of this will be made available via a press release informing persons. Individuals will have to fill out these forms, and immediately it will make the system a lot more accountable, because you'd be able to see some of the persons who have been mischief makers in our system with email, etc., and this type of thing. And as I said, is going to be verified by immigration. There are a few points I'd like to make before accepting questions. The policy continues to be on a case-by-case basis. We've always said from day one it's a case-by-case basis. The metrics have been built into this form. There are certain questions in that form that will immediately filter through AI, artificial intelligence, into the various boxes to make the decision making as to exemption granting an easier system. As it currently stands, we've had a number of instances, and I've never spoken so openly about it before because I didn't think there was a need to. I have had many instances where we've granted persons who have been emailing, persons who've been in the media, persons who've been making live videos all over the place, that they're ready to come home, they want to come, and when they were granted the approval to come home, when they were put on the list for the CAL flights to come home, there have been quite a few people who then turn around and say, well, I'm not ready right now, you know. I had an instance, and this person is constantly making videos. My sister actually coming up to Miami tomorrow, so I'm going to stay up here and spend some time with her, and then you all will put me on another flight down the road. Of course, when you're dealing with other people, because there is a line, the queue is moving. You've heard how the queue has moved from 5,500 people to 19,000 people, and 11,600 people have been granted exemptions to come home. Those things potentially jeopardize the equity of the system. We will obviously continue to retain some discretion in the system because there are instances that will come up over time. Every single system always has a discretion and an exemption system where you may take other decisions. For example, very often we've had persons with emergency medical situations who may we deal with before those who had applied before. The way the system operates is exactly as we've said before, but now we're filtering it in through this automatic or this IT-driven form-based system. So this is going to be introduced from Monday. I just, in closing, would like to again plead with people, just think very carefully about whether it is necessary for you to be traveling at this time. Because you still have a lot of people, and I often wonder why, saying, look, I want to go out this week, but I want to come back home in 2 weeks. That's not going to work. All right? If it's for medical reasons and other justifiable reasons, yes, fine. But persons have to understand when a global pandemic, our borders are closed, and the way we all used to be able to come and go as before, it simply doesn't exist whilst our borders remain in this position. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank all of those who have worked so hard in making not only this system a reality, but in managing the exemption system. Because what persons don't understand, at the end of the day, they're humans on the other side. And you always hear the complaints about, oh, they didn't answer the phone the way I like, and they were this, etc. But understand how difficult it is, and that system which was run by our permanent secretaries, I thank them, a deputy permanent secretary, and some very young, talented people who stood and took the pressure for months along with me as they managed the system every single day and every night. Because very often at 11 o'clock in the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, I am there asking them about certain things in the system and expecting a response. I thank them. I thank the immigration officers, the customs officers who have continued to hold their post, the Trinidad and Tobago defense officers, the police officers, our Ministry of Health personnel, all of these people who have made it a possibility in managing our border control, our exemption system, our repatriation system, and our quarantine system, which will remain in place. Another important element here that you see is the state quarantine versus the state supervised. State supervised being when you pay for quarantine. We've increased the number of facilities. Hopefully people will be able to go to state supervised quarantine facilities, and we can increase the numbers there as well. This is not abnormal. I was thinking in Australia, from day one, they have an exemption system. It's over 40,000 of their nationals around the world trying to get back to Australia. Every single person who's granted permission to return to Australia has to pay for quarantine at a hotel for 14 days. Trinidad from day one has had state supervised quarantine where the state has picked up the cost of the quarantining. as it stands right now, persons coming from the United Kingdom who have traveled from the United Kingdom within the last 14 days are required to quarantine for 14 days before they're released. And that system will continue. We will continue to review the system. This afternoon is about us saying to everyone from Monday, welcome to the new form and the online system. And we expect people to be responsible in how it is utilized and used. I'll take questions at this stage. You have the mic there to the back. Afternoon.
So there are persons who want to know if you have already applied for exemption months ago, right, and you did not get approval, is it that you would now need to reapply come Monday?
The answer is yes.
And I have another question as well. Is there a plan in place in the event the site crashes, due to the overwhelming response that may come?
That is something that I've been discussing with the team, and that's why it's taken us a little bit longer to launch than I would have liked. It is one of the things we're very cautious about and very aware of. I mean, I hope I am not the IT person, I'm not the person building out the system, but it is something they were aware of. I've raised it, and I hope we've put in place things that will prevent that. I guess it is always a possibility. Let's hope it doesn't happen.
Are you worried about hackers?
I'm not worried about hackers at this stage, no.
Good afternoon, Urvashi from TV6. Minister, are you able to say who developed this system and the cost of it?
All right. There is no cost of it. It was developed, I'm assuming there's no cost of it. It was developed by our IT people here, the Ministry of National Security, some very young, bright people, in collaboration with, and you would have seen it there, iGovTT. So it's all developed by the state.
I suppose some may ask why this system wasn't developed before. We're almost a year, as you mentioned.
Like you all, you continue to look at it, you continue to evolve, you continue to hope that maybe something will change with the pandemic, etc. It is something that they have been working on for, I would say, a few months. They're always teething problems. You're always looking to see other jurisdictions, how they may have done it, what can we do to better it, etc. But we're here now. I can't change the past, and we're ready to launch it. And I'm hoping that the system is robust enough.
For those who have been out of TNT for a longer period, does that necessarily mean that they would be lower down on the priority listing?
No, I mean, one of the questions is, when did you last leave TNT? Another question that will be in the form is, where are you normally domiciled? So if you were out, and you're seeing this category of people, I have people saying, well, I left in November or December 2019. But then when you look at when they apply to come back, it may be October, it may be September 2020. So what you deduce from that is the category of people I was speaking, maybe green card holders or others who've gone to visit their children. They spend 6 months outside, they're coming back now. So those are the filters that we would use now in the prioritization. So no, it doesn't mean that you are now pushed down the list at all. What it means is that if they meet all of the right metrics, they may be the next to get the exemption because they've been out for a longer period of time, they've put in their application, etc., as opposed to somebody who decided to go and shop in Miami for Christmas and is now ready to return home.
Now, you can query your status as was shown in the video, right? What sort of response would you get? You are 100 on the list, or what sort of response would...
That's a good question. And the IT people are developing, okay, so the various responses that would come. So what I expect is, well, this is where you are, it's being looked at. You may be on the next batch. Because remember, all of this as well depends on the space we have in terms of flights coming back in, and that's one of the points I wanted to make. Thanks for reminding me. When you saw one of the questions that was being asked there is the intended port of entry. So right now we have CAL flights on a 10-day rotation basis from Miami, New York, Barbados, Canada, and then sometimes we mix up in between there. So those are really the ports of entry to Trinidad and Tobago via these flights. So you have people in the UK, they would traditionally fly to Barbados and come in. So when people are applying, one of the questions is, where are you at now? I am in Germany. but where is your intended port of entry? New York. So it allows us to assist as well now in the placement, in the priority list for flights. And then, well, of course, the quarantine type will help as well.
Minister, somewhere in there you mentioned artificial intelligence helping in the decision making. Is it that these questions will be weighted and then it go, or is it that someone like an immigration officer literally sits by a desk and would consider each case?
Okay, so what has been going on for months, you all would have heard me talk about the criteria. So at the outset, when we were looking at those persons and there was a larger number of persons who were stuck outside, who had gone for that 1 week, that 2 week, maybe that month vacation, and then the borders were shut, the elderly, the sick, those persons with newborn babies, those persons with families. So we've cleared off that. So that is what I mean. There are some of these metrics built into the system that will just help filter. Ultimately, what it will do is it will produce these spreadsheets where we can look at it and see, okay, this amount fits into this category, this amount, and it marries it, etc., to make the decision making on a case-by-case basis that much easier.
If my colleagues will allow me, I just have one question on a slightly different topic. Do you have any update on illegal crossing as it relates to the Coast Guard vessels? Have they been back up, and have we seen a decrease in those crossings? Thank you.
I don't have the up-to-date data on the number of interceptions, the number of interdictions, and the number of crossings, etc. That is something I intend to provide in the not-too-distant future. What I did sign off on, I think, in the last week or so, are some of our Daman vessels. They are serviced in Suriname and in Curacao at Daman shipyards. So they're finally making their way. I hope their COVID has delayed that, but I think at least one of the vessels is going for their servicing, if not two. We're also recently, and actually it's just today, in speaking with the Minister of Health, Daman engineers to come in, and some of the engineers, one of the things that was delaying them is they didn't want to have to quarantine. So apart from those one engineer and the two engineers that rotated, which is a contractual, there are other engineers that were required to come in and fix certain things on the vessel. So they've been asking about quarantine. So the Ministry of Health is responding to my request for that, and hopefully we'll be able to get them here shortly. But we have been making do with the vessels. We've also been, Venezuela's authorities have also been doing their work on their side, and we've been increasing that work.
Yeah, hi Minister, Happy New Year.
Happy
Anna
New Year.
Ramdas from the Express. How big is the IT team that will be managing this process? How many persons would be sifting through these applications?
No, well, they're not sifting through the applications, right? So what we had actually done over time is we had built out, because when we were sifting through the emails, we had built out a substantial team. We had brought in some young people to help us with that. But by moving to this online route now, I'm hoping it reduces the need and the workload for that team. I can't remember the exact number. I'm not sure how much the number will go down to now, because you'll still require persons to send out the email, to do the work with Cal and these types of things. But I don't know the exact number of the team.
You mentioned as of January 21st, 19,941 applications were received. So would the ministry be sending out an email to these persons saying our process has changed? And
that is what I am counting on you all to do when you get your stories out. I mean, the truth is people do look in. We will put up the necessary alert system on our internet, and that's what this press conference is about, to tell persons. And yes, I'm sure we may be able to run an automatic email to persons saying, look, please go to Ministry of National Security's website and fill out your online forms.
so after the forms are processed and approved, is it that it comes to you specifically to give the final approval?
Fortunately, it doesn't work that way. Over time, the permanent secretaries and the deputy permanent secretary have been assisting with this. So what has been happening is they would produce, along with the team, using the set criteria, the lists and the number of persons. But what may happen is I may give an instruction, okay, all persons who applied from the United Kingdom, from the Middle East, from the UAE, from Australia during this period, I'm just grant them exemptions, because we know they have to make their way back through some port of entry and this type of thing. So I don't sit down and go through every form, but it is open to the team to come and say, look, Ms. Ramdas has an emergency, something has just happened, she is asking that you give consideration to her circumstances, etc., and that would fall into that category that I say it will be a discretionary decision at that stage.
So given that we have this process in place, would there be more CAL flights to bring people back home?
As I said a short while ago, the flights and the number of persons who are being repatriated will always depend on, once the borders are closed, the space in quarantine. It will also depend on what we're facing on the ground here in Trinidad. So for example, if God forbid the numbers locally take off and the number of positives and they start to put strain or increase the work being done in our parallel COVID healthcare system, we may have to pull back, which is what happened in August, September of last year, because the Ministry of Health started using some of the facilities we were using for quarantine as step-down facilities. I'm hoping we're not there and we can just keep the numbers going. But what I would like you all to understand is, you see, this rotating category of persons who are going out and coming back in, going out and thinking they could go out and come back in, and that feeds into these numbers. I do expect that to stop. We've had a lot of students, for example, go back out. So they came home for summer, Christmas, etc. And God forbid something happens in the jurisdictions they're in. We see those applications as well. My university is now offering online. I don't want to be stuck in my room. I mean, I was reading something in France the other day. There were almost student protests taking place in France because the students at the university are literally being confined to their room. And they're saying, look, I prefer to come home and do it online. So we factor those things in as well, but it will always depend on the numbers and how much space we have in quarantine.
If I may just ask one more question. You mentioned that there are category of persons who have been domiciled in the U.S. and wherever, and their passports would have been expired. So is the ministry taking any steps to help renew at the embassies and whatnot? Or would they be allowed to return with their U.S. passports?
Let me tell you all something. From day one, I remember when we had closed the borders to non-nationals, and PS will bear me out on this, to non-nationals, but still allowed nationals in, etc. We were literally dealing with persons at airline counters producing, well, look, this is my old passport, etc. We have not refused anybody entry as a national to Trinidad and Tobago on the basis of, well, your passport is expired. We've also had persons, as I mentioned a short while ago, Trinidadians who have had their children born outside. So obviously they don't have a Trinidadian birth certificate because they're born wherever, or any Trinidad. We've not refused them either. We have made the arrangements for all of these people whose passports have expired. We've reached a stage where we started dealing with persons with permanent residency. Their residencies may expire. We have not put that as a stop point to anyone. All right? They've segregated you, Shane.
Afternoon, sir. Shane Supervill from the Newsday newspaper here. I also would like to ask a slightly unrelated question, and this has to do, just wanted to know, what's the government's status on the policy to extend the period for Venezuelan migrants in TNT? Just wanted to know if the policy has been formalized and published as yet.
Okay, there are going to be two parts of that policy. One is a policy that is being designed as to how we deal with persons applying for refugee status and that area of migrancy, but with specific reference to the Venezuelan registration program that went on and the extension of it. The note is being prepared for Cabinet's consideration. The Prime Minister himself announced that we will be granting a 6-month period. What we're also putting in place is we would require persons who want to renew. Nobody new can come into the system. Those who want to renew their Venezuelan registration migrant cards will be required to fill out forms, provide immigration with new information, new data, up-to-date data, obviously to assist our system before the new cards are issued to them. So they're working out how to do that in the middle of a pandemic. It's not going to be like we had before with everybody congregating. I've told them I want a system that is safe for people who are coming in to do it, as well as for immigration officers. And that is going to go to Cabinet shortly. Okay, thank you all very much. I appreciate your time, as usual, and please stay safe out there.
This is TTT. Live for local.